Welcome, everyone, to the very first episode of the Ascending Crows podcast. This is a passion project between three friends, and we're just really excited to share this with you guys. We are a group of like-minded people who are just seekers and artists, and this is a way for us to share what we've learned over the years and really just share an experience with you guys. This podcast is based in Eastern meditation practice, but we really our aim is to create a spiritual community and to give people access to practices that can directly help them and just give an experience. So in this very first episode, we're going to be going over a practice called the 3-point awareness. This practice has brought so many different levels of equanimity and quiet to my life. It was one of the very first formal sitting meditation exercises that I learned. It's really about learning how to rest in that in-between space. It's mainly comes from a practice called vipassana, which is about increasing your awareness, scanning your body, but it has a very strong element of samatha, which is a one-pointed concentration. So really, you're supposed to learn how to balance between vipassana, awareness, and samatha, one-pointed concentration, through balancing these three different points of awareness, which are awareness of the breath, awareness of the outline of the body, and between those 2 points, you discover so much about the body by just paying attention to the breath and the shape of the body, and then finally, the awareness of sound. Just one last thing before we jump into the practice. When explaining the importance of posture in this meditation exercise and going over the placement of the legs, I use language that really in this modern era is divisive, and that was not my intention. I'm talking about what's really in its root in yoga and qigong, which is the importance of the energetic channels in the body and how our legs relate to our sexual energy. And so if I say, if you're male, place your right leg on the outside, and if you're female, place your left leg on the outside. This is to balance that sexual creative energy. However, in using this language, it really is divisive, as people going through this amazing transformative period where we can be open about our sexuality and orientation. So if you identify as a woman or if you identify as a man, you can go along with those guidelines, or really just put your legs where you're most comfortable. This energy comes from our hormones, and we all have a balance of male and female sexual hormones in our body, no matter what our orientation or identification of gender is. So please don't think you can't practice this if you are trans or non-binary. This practice is for everyone. Just go with what is most comfortable for you and take to the practice as much as you can. So settle down, find a comfortable seat, and just get ready to let go, unwind, and I hope you find something meaningful in this practice. Enjoy.
Ascending Crows Podcast.
Hi, welcome to the first episode of the podcast. My name is Sam Orlowski. To my right is Manuel Simone. To my left is Joe Serkeel. And today we are going to be going over what's called the 3-point awareness meditation. I first discovered this simple awareness exercise in a book written by Ezra Beta called Zen Heart. And it really was one of the first major practices that helped me develop a regular disciplined practice. And it's just a great starting point to understanding Zazen and other types of Eastern Buddhist meditation. So let's begin by focusing on our posture. If you're comfortable sitting on the floor, I urge you to please do so in what's called the Burmese sitting position. Now this differs from having just your legs crossed or lotus posture. In this position, our shins are actually placed one in front of the other. For men, you want your right leg on the outside, and for women, you want your left leg on the outside. Now, for the posture of your spine, you want to feel the hips connecting with the ground. So if you're sitting on a chair, if sitting cross-legged is not comfortable, if you're sitting on a chair, you want to make sure that you are at the very edge of your seat so that your hips and spine are connecting with the seat and with both feet planted on the ground firmly so that you can feel this connection to the earth and have that grounding sensation. The same goes for if you're sitting on a cushion, which more often than not, I sit on a cushion. So you want to just make sure that your hips are all the way to the edge. And sitting on a cushion will also just help you keep your legs in this position by, elevating your hips and relieving some of the pressure off of your legs. So, with this seated position, we want to make sure our spine is nice and straight. So we want to have, envision your head directly over your heart chest area and your heart chest area directly over your lower abdomen. And from here, you just want to slightly lean forward and slightly tuck your chin. This will allow us to keep our spine erect, but also to keep our back nice and relaxed so that we can continue breathing deeply. So with our spine and sitting posture centered, let's begin to close our eyes and just to breathe deeply. Feel your shoulders pull away from your ears, and let's place our hands in what's called the cosmic mudra. So let's place our left hand on top of our right, have our thumbs connecting, forming neither a mountain nor a valley, and we have our pinkies touch our belly 1 inch below our navel. Now we don't want our elbows hanging out here, but we want them into our sides. And now let's close our eyes. Begin to naturally breathe in and out. Don't force your breath to be deep, and don't hold your breath. Find the natural rhythm of your in and out breath. Now on your next breath in, feel the air go in and out of your nose. As you breathe in, pay attention to the cold sensation of the air entering your nostrils. And as you breathe out, pay attention to the heat leaving your nostrils. This is our first point of awareness. And within this first point of awareness, there's 3 points. Feeling the air go in and out of our nose is 1.1, let's say. Now on your next inhalation, feel the breath go in your nose and enter your chest. Feel your chest rise and expand, and feel it fall back down naturally as you exhale, and feel the breath leave your nose. One more time, breathe in, feel the air enter your nose, enter your chest. Maybe your shoulders rise on your inhalation, maybe your shoulders fall on your exhalation. Now on our next breath in, feel the air enter your nose, enter your chest, and enter your abdomen. That's 1.3. And as you exhale, let your abdomen and chest fall naturally, and the air exit your nose. Let's breathe 3 times with this first point of awareness. Again, inhale, feel the air enter your nose, enter your chest and expand your upper body, and enter your lower abdomen, and feel that deep sense of relaxation. Again, in the nose, into the chest, and into the abdomen. One more time at your own natural rhythm. Okay, now with this sensation as our base level awareness, let's bring attention to the outline of our body. On your next inhalation, imagine the point of the top of your head, and as you inhale, draw the outline down the sides of your head to your shoulders. And as you exhale, feel the outline of your head and shoulders. On the next inhalation, draw the point from the shoulders down to your fingertips and up to your armpits. Breathe deeply, and as you exhale, focus on the outline of your arms. On your next inhalation, draw the point from your armpits down to your hips, and as you exhale, feel the outline of your abdomen and chest. On your next inhalation, draw the point from your hips down the outside of your legs, all the way down to your toe tips, and then up the inside of your legs, up to the middle of your groin. Inhale, and as you exhale, focus on the outline of your legs. Now on your next inhalation, I want you to focus on the entire outline of your body. Redraw over parts that may seem unclear and form a full connection of the entire outside of your body, all the way from the top of your head to the tips of your toes. Allow the first point of awareness of feeling the sensation of the breath connect to the outline of your body, and allow these 2 points of awareness to connect. Maintain throughout the entire practice the posture of the cosmic mudra. If you can keep aware of this mudra, this will help you keep awareness throughout the entire practice. Now, as you rest evenly between these 2 points of awareness, start to shift your attention to the third point of awareness, which is the sensation of hearing. Pay attention to the sounds directly around you. Listen to the quality of your own breath first. Does it feel noisy and labored? Or is it calm, long, and relaxed? Try to ever so slightly adjust the quality of your breathing. Now pay attention to the sounds a little bit further outside of you. Maybe it's the heater or AC, the movement of pipes or creaking of floorboards within your room, apartment, or house. If you live in a city, perhaps you hear cars driving by outside, people walking by talking. Or if you live in a quieter area, perhaps you hear the noise of crickets, birds chirping. But just pay attention to whatever sounds are around you. Slowly push out that awareness, little by little. Now, this third point of awareness can cause thoughts to stir a little bit more. Thoughts are inevitable in practice, but if you feel yourself becoming overwhelmed by thought, return to the first point of awareness. From this point on, slowly shift between each point of awareness and slowly meld them all into one singular awareness. Keep breathing naturally. Follow your own rhythm of your own breath. Each person has their own rhythm. So if these instructions were too fast or too slow, take them at your own time. Pay attention to your mudra. Keep breathing naturally. If you find yourself needing to be anchored, focus on the first point. If you find yourself needing more focus, focus on the third point. Find balance in the second point. For as long as you can, stay within these 3 awarenesses and feel yourself sharpen and gain clarity through balancing this awareness. gradually ease into this practice. Don't force your sessions to be very long, but also allow yourself time to delve deep into the practice. Come on. All right, so we just did our 3-point awareness meditation. Stuff like that. Just that basic awareness is such a simple thing, but I find that these simple practices really are the most profound when you just let the practice itself work. So I know you guys have done some practice before, but what was your experience like in this short, like 15-minute session?
that was incredibly relaxing.
Mm.
Like my whole, even us like making this whole thing, the whole process just felt much more zenned out and natural. Like everything coming out of it, what I'm in now, coming out of it, everything felt like, feels like any task could hit me right now and
Right.
not be a burden. I would just accept. And physically, or feeling sensation of my nose as the breathing, as I did, like with all the breathing going in and out, it felt like a buzz, and like a buzz of energy
Right.
through the nose.
I think overall a good experience. I think that there were some challenges that might have become distractions along the way. Like, for example, physically sitting in that position for that long can be difficult to the
Absolutely.
point where
we're not always used to that. It's something you got to get used to.
Exactly. Yeah. But I still think that there's a way of getting beyond that, and probably the path of least resistance with that was trying to focus on that discomfort, but not get hindered by it or not get distracted by it, but just
Right.
sort of to acknowledge that it exists, accept it, but still
Right.
try to go forward with my intention of the meditation. I think ultimately when I come into that, when you go into mindfulness, I think I'll rephrase that. I think in order for me to get into mindfulness, I need to be able to dip into that practice of acceptance. I think acceptance is an important part of that.
That's the baseline thing, right? That we don't actually exert ourselves into this practice, but that we sort of let this practice work through us. And the more that we sort of just, like you corrected yourself there. You said, get beyond it, which I think is not the right mindset to have. You corrected yourself soon, but you said, you just deal with it as it comes. You feel that discomfort. Right. You feel that, those negative sensations, that overwhelming thoughts, and you just sit there, you breathe, and you deal with it. And that goes back to what you said, Manny, as well. When you're in that relaxed state, you just take those things as they come. Like, oh, there's some discomfort in my legs. That's okay. If I breathe, I stay connected to that. I feel relaxed, and I feel my legs feel better.
Yeah, I think that's where it came from. With the physical part, especially. I felt there are different times where I felt like, oh, I don't know if are my hips. It's like I was questioning it. Like, are my hips hurting?
Right.
Yeah. Is it that my back is hurting, or am I strengthening?
Hyper awareness.
Right.
Right.
Hyper aware of it, and then through like even pondering if it's hurting, I breathe into that, and it does.
But I think hyper awareness is a constructive exercise as well.
Right.
Even if it can become, and I suffer from this obviously, all the same. But I think you have to kind of come into it right with that, and then sort of turn it into a positive, right? Or
right.
Like, so even in a negative, or even in discomfort, can kind of forces this process of hyper awareness. But that's like a very integral part of mindfulness.
Well, that's actually really one of the points that Shakyamuni Buddha really stressed. The origins of Buddhism are founded on not seeing discomfort and displeasure and pain as these ultimately bad things. Pleasure is supposedly just as bad as all this stuff, right? So anything that keeps us either attached to something and wanting more, or being averted from something, it's wanting to be something. It's wanting to be in a different place other than right here and now, right? So that's such a great thing to say, because that shows us that we actually need to experience this in order to understand that deeper level of awareness, without any sort of negative thing that we feel, oh, this is discomfort. If everything was all pleasure and contentment, there'd be nothing that would drive us deeper.
Right. Yeah, sure. Yeah, like you have to accept, like when something does, it like gives discomfort. You have to accept that it is coming and like let it
Right.
guide you in the new direction.
There's a saying that medicine wouldn't exist without the disease itself. So
You gotta have both.
exactly. So we wouldn't have these ways to cure ourselves if there were no ailments in the beginning.
Right.
And on a literal level, if we were all not sick, we wouldn't need medicine. It wouldn't be a big deal. But in this situation, the medicine, which is the practice, which is the transformative thing, is necessary, right? If we didn't have any of this negativity, we wouldn't have the ability to actually delve deeper and have self-realization. Yeah. So I want to ask you guys just a couple questions. We talked about the sensations of discomfort and the things that can possibly distract us, but what are some things that can also guide us further into the practice? We can go on for hours and hours about the things that distract us, right? But there's certain, especially when you first start a practice, there's things that really stand out, like that you didn't notice before, right?
Yeah.
So what are some of those things that you start to notice when you start a practice? Like what allow you to first sort of go deeper into that level of calmness?
I think as you go into the posture, you can, like how you were explaining it, like every little bit makes you just more aware of each part of your body as you make sure your right foot is out, and then it's like, and then you bring the hands where they need to be. Every
Right.
little step is like step by step. Your pinky all the way down to like the littlest details. The thumbs connected, like, and then right here. Every little step compounds until the point where you feel every part of your body that you just moved. And
Right.
then once you like establish that,
It all becomes connected.
it all becomes connected. Your whole body becomes connected, and then you start to establish the breath, which is like the rhythm through it. And then as it feels connected, like a movement happens with your breath. In
Beautiful.
every part of it,
Beautiful.
right? And then from that, it's like you feel connected that way, you feel in tune.
What you just described there in Taoist practice, that's called finding the movement within the stillness, right? So in the scope of, let's say, just martial arts practice, we have these two polarities, the yin side and the yang side. The yang, all the way yang side is all the way physical, right? All the way yin is all the way, motionless, still. The practice of they call it neidan, which is internal practice.
Yeah.
But even it's the balance of everything, the balance of all, everything is a microcosm, a macrocosm of the same thing, and everything has an inverse and a reflection. So within that stillness, you discover motion.
Yeah.
You discover something. You think that's what really drove me to the practice, was realizing that this, you are quieting yourself down, but the more you quiet yourself down, the more you discover that own dynamic flow within you. And that to me is the most transformative thing. That it's not, it does suck to just sit down at first, but when you really get into it, it's something brand new. It's no longer this chore that you have to do. It's something you can actually look forward to.
Yeah. I mean, that, especially when you reach that level. And we've done this. We ended up doing it a few times tonight, and definitely like at the beginning, I remember it was like felt like going into some kind of different, especially I know the whole, like, you're supposed to stare right here, right at the center of your forehead. So doing that and with everything else, I don't know. I remember the first time especially. And it's interesting is, we had the lights on, we had like the light kind of like shining, and at first you think like, oh, that's gonna hinder me in like keeping my eyes closed and like into it. But like things like that, it's like, okay, there's a light shining on me, and everyone thinks that you have to do meditation in the dark, but like you don't. So it's kind of like you accept stuff like that, and then it's like you go, like with the light, like the light helps you.
You can really,
in that direction.
Yeah, you can actually meditate it at any time, which is kind of an interesting misconception.
Right.
Because I think we like to we like to pigeonhole meditation that is this like
Right.
very like
We separate
rigid
meditation
process.
from the rest of our life. We
Right.
think we meditate and we have to have that time or else we can't, right? Whereas we can, as you said, every single moment's an opportunity.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because there was a point in my meditation practices when I was a bit younger with it where I think I did make progress, but I think I sort of pushed it a little too much, feeling like, especially with maybe guided meditations, for example, things that on a slightly different topic relate to sort of hyper focusing on different parts of your body.
Right.
And I think that is a good exercise.
Like self-healing practices you were
Right.
telling me about.
Right. Like even if I wasn't calling it that at the time, I think there's like an application of that.
Right.
Sure. But I think, there was, I had read, I think it was from that Qigong book that you had referred me to.
The Small Circulation by Dr. Yang Jingming.
Yeah, I think there was something that to the effect in his book that really resonated with me, how you more so want to, as we described, treat meditation as something that you can do, you should always kind of be doing. And that like really changed my whole like paradigm of meditation, where I thought it was like this, it was a process, and then I realized it's more like a way of life. And just becoming aware of that had made significant strides in my ability to meditate as well.
Well, I want to go back on what you said, something that I really liked earlier, which is about earlier in your practice you didn't label it as such, and I think sometimes meditation is even more powerful when you're able to do that, because language is something that we place on it, and that can even, any word or term that we place on a meditation can actually take someone further away from it, because we're placing a label on it. We're supposed to be discovering this space in between where we don't have to label, right? So I just love that thought. And that phenomenon that you're describing in the book, in Chinese meditations, that stage is called regulating without regulating, where you're practicing. It's not an exertion. You're not trying to practice all the time, but you've gotten to this point where you didn't need to think about how deep your breath was. You don't need to think about your body posture. You don't need to think about it. At first, you actually do need to try to think about this. But there's a stage in your meditation where eventually you're doing it, but you're doing it without doing it.
Yeah.
And that's how
natural.
Exactly. You just fall into this natural rhythm. That's the point of meditation. It's doing without doing. You're trying to undo these things of, I need to constantly apply them. No, you get to this point where you're regulating that meditation practice, but naturally by undoing. This is sort of like the concept that they call Wu Wei Tu. It means non-doing, right? We do in accordance with the nature of the Tao. We do what is natural of us to do. If we're hungry, we begin to eat. If we're tired, we lay down. We don't, I should eat at this certain point. We don't need to plan our day like this. We can just live through our day.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right, so we're back. Just have to take a little break. We were just discussing. Jesus Christ, guys, help me out here.
You said something about like the things that we have to do in our everyday lives, right?
Okay. Yes. We're talking about consciously maybe doing an overexertion application versus applying yourself in everyday life, but sort of having things go in a natural accordance to what your urges are, your true will, what you align with in life. Yeah. How they're two different things.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And how we like do life and then we meditate. And,
right.
And like how it can be a little more synchronized.
Or that the goal of meditation is to teach us that it's not separate, right?
Yeah.
That the goal, one of the goals. I mean, we shouldn't have any goals in meditation, right? But it's just one of the great side effects that happen from a great, effective meditation practice, that we learn messages like that.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to ask you guys next was, we all have our own reasons for meditation, and maybe you guys are fairly new to this exercise, but you guys have been practicing meditation for some time. What was the thing that either initially got you into it, or what was the feeling you felt that you wanted to go after that more? And what was the practice like? Did you have something in your life that you wanted to enhance? Did you want to just discover a part of yourself that maybe you didn't know was there? What's your story?
At the start of quarantine, I wanted to establish like feeling good in my space. You know what I'm saying? Like being home, you had to like be at home.
Right.
Within yourself. You know what I mean? So I got into it that way. With just
Pretty tough for a lot of people.
Very much.
Yeah.
So it was trying to just like, especially with like so much on the mind, it was kind of, especially, I do a waking up every morning for like 10 minutes. And so it's kind of like my 10 minutes at the start of the day, just not think about anything else.
Right.
Only to dedicate to just.
Good reset button at the beginning of the day.
To be still and at peace, just start the day within myself, and then it's kind of like you grow out from there.
Right.
Sometimes I'll do it at other points of the day if I'm just in that zone or whatever, or in that in that good setting for it, and you just kind of reset that as well.
Right. That's great, but I mean, like, what about quarantine pushed you into that practice? Like, what like was it that you had more free time and it was an interest that you had, or was this like a remedy that you had to quarantine to sort of?
It was both. Like,
yeah,
you have time, so it's kind of like, I was trying to see like the good and everything else. Like, maybe all this is like a reason to like just take care of yourself.
Right. Yeah.
Time for yourself.
An opportunity to like be with your thoughts, and I almost liken it to like a spiritual awakening in the sense that maybe if that's not like the purpose of quarantining per se, I think it's like an unintended sort of benefit. And without sounding like too off topic, that's why I really like. Spoiler alert for anyone who's like watching like Korra on Netflix or like intends to. I really like.
It's old enough to not worry about spoilers.
But just because one of my favorite takeaways, because I'm just watching the show now, is like, without getting too much in the particulars, basically there's like an instance, there's a spiritual awakening that happens to the show that ushers great change. But naturally, there's people who are exploiting this change for their own evil or political agendas, and there are people who are trying to do righteous things and do better by the world, right? And I like the sound bite that I love that I took away from that is that like sort of one of the masters of this show, for lack of a better term, says change is neither inherently good nor bad, and it's more what's important.
Just a fact of life,
right?
It's a law,
and then so the thing that the most important thing for the individual to do is to adapt, right? And to be able to accept change. So I
it's really the only thing we can do.
Right.
If we don't choose, we stay stuck in wherever we are, and the rest of the world changes without us.
Yeah. And I think even until very recently, I'm starting to only realize now that I've been, as some people call it, forcing my will, right? Forcing my will on you can force your will on anything. You can force your will on your reality. You can force it on yourself, right? And I feel like as a person, I've grown from this time. Absolutely. By being able to do that, by being able to be alone with my thoughts.
Let's talk about that actually, because I really like how you compared harmonic convergence, which is in the topic he's talking about, Legend of Korra, to the coronavirus. That I think that's a really apt comparison. And Manny, I don't know if you're familiar with Korra, so I'll just explain a little bit more. So the harmonic convergence is basically the linking of the spirit world with the physical world, and a lot more people gain their innate bending powers. So, of course, it's not as magical. The coronavirus is quite scary, but there's something too happening on a global scale that whenever we experience something traumatic, that is a catalyst for spiritual awakening. Whenever this is the reason why, it was a tradition in Rinzai and Linji Zen and Chan practice respectively. I mean, they are the same, right? Just but anyways, to beat the students with a stick.
Right.
That was the people get an idea of what it is to be a monk, and they think, oh, I'm just going to experience peace and all this stuff. And if you go in expecting that, then you're going to diminish the teaching. So they realize like that, at very early on stages in the development of, Chinese and Japanese Buddhism to cause to do something that you wouldn't expect. And this forces you into the moment. This forces an experience. Where otherwise it may have not happened. That's a teacher is someone who will see you at a point and know what certain bombs to set off for certain realizations, and that's what coronavirus is in a way. It shook us all awake. It made us realize we all need to chill out. We need to stay sedentary. We need to not be going all the time, right? And that's the lesson that we're all learning. Whether or not everyone's digesting it or not is its own thing. But I really like that. I really liked what you said. So what was the first thing you were shook and awakened to by this pandemic?
Well, I mean, just off of that, like I remember seeing pictures of so many famous places completely empty, and
right.
With the caption like the world takes a break. So just on that, it felt like the world taking a break. How you were saying, it felt like everything went on pause. So like shaken by that, I remember. Oh man, when it hit home, it was like going, when everyone accepted, like I guess we all gotta go to the grocery store and stock up on groceries.
Right.
Seeing the grocery stores ransacked.
Seeing the toilet paper gone.
Yeah, everyone, and seeing other people do it, because you're like, sometimes, especially like media age, how you discover all this news, you feel like, now in the fake news stuff, it always feels like everything is like, is this actually happening? You'll go out and see other people reacting the same way. You're like,
right.
I guess this is actually happening. That was like the most shaken, and then everyone you talk to was like more. Is this happening?
Right. It's you're constantly questioning, and I feel like, to be honest, the last 4 years of Trump's presidency was like that. Yeah. We sort of that was almost the beginning moment for at least Americans. I think the rest of the world maybe already had this perspective of us, but for us to at least be like, what the fuck is this? Yeah. Like, and really from that point on, the I don't want to say the whole, because clearly we're one of the most divisive times in our country, but a larger part of the population started to become aware of how corrupt our system is. That's the thing that shakes you awake too. This actually leads me to something else I want to talk about, you guys, which is can you be on a spiritual path but also be content with your society? A lot of older Tibetan Buddhists said that spiritual realization goes hand in hand with questioning what's going on around you. That, really there's sort of this inherent system of power that's trying to capitalize on people being stuck in the cycle of samsara, of greed and attachment. And that, having a spiritual outlook, is one of the first steps of getting you out of that. So do you think it's possible to fully be content with every aspect of your society and be on this path?
I think it's very difficult in our society, meaning American society. On the one hand, we live in a system that lends itself to freedom of thought, diversity of ideas, and freedom of thought, and that's a conduit for its own kind of good in this way. But
absolutely.
But on the other hand, though, I don't think we are as spiritually integrated as certain countries are. For example, I felt like people were much more grounded, much more harmonious in Southeast Asia, particularly. I found that like Thai people,
Thailand, Cambodia
to a lesser extent, but also Cambodians, that it was just a more sustainable lifestyle.
I mean,
more sustainable system.
Not to say that Thailand has plenty of issues, and even a lot of those big Buddhist temples with these gold statues. It's actually, I mean, that's someone who loves Buddhism and loves studying Buddhism. I find that that sometimes may be contradictory, but there definitely is something to be said about a country that is a Buddhist nation, right? That is a Buddhist monarchy, oligarchy. Took a quick break, but now we're back. We were talking about the influence that Buddhist monarchies have on the overall population. And we're talking about Thailand, and I do agree to a certain extent, but there are parts of Thai culture that seem to really go against certain tenets of Buddhism. But the best example I see of that is in Bhutan, where they really slowly integrated modern technology over the course of 50 years into society. They've really been one of the prime examples of living in harmony with nature, and seeing that as the root of happiness. What has existed in their country is that they have a happiness index for their country. That's how they measure wealth in the country. And what has brought a lot of the problems is the development of the Western world. That has brought more. I mean, there's been natural cannabis that's grown there, but there's been more drugs that have come in with more production, more Western types of food that lead to more types of disease. And they see this, they want to keep integrating. They see integrating modern technology as necessary, adapting and changing, right? But they also see this affecting their happiness scale. So there absolutely is something to be said about adopting certain qualities from a religion to integrate to society. We are needing to move past certain things and adapt, and we do need to drop the dogmatic nature of religion. 100%. Doing away with labels and doing away with calling it a religion, is helpful, but it is also wrong to say that we need to do away with all of it, right? When clearly, seeing the example of Bhutan, and how even without a standard of living that we see as necessary, that they have an overall better standard of living still.
Yeah. In general, as religious rhetoric ramps up especially along with like new technology that the world has. That's just it's a dangerous combination.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Because wars getting fought over religion, you know what I mean? And like the ability to do so because of technology.
Well, yeah, that's a good point.
And cultural, not even just religion, because it all blends into cultures.
It's
wars.
The great philosophic minds say that that technology, and really that the great spiritual leaders of the 20th century would say that technology is outpacing our own personal wisdom, our own personal consciousness, that our technology is getting past our own spiritual capability.
Yeah.
And you're right that is a dangerous combination, because we are having greater physical capability and influence on our world without fully understanding the consequences of all that stuff.
Yeah. And just like growing, our resources beyond anything we could get, and it's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy enough.
Absolutely.
Growing our abilities and growing our knowledge. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I like that thing we were watching today that kind of talked about a spiritual disconnect, right? So that there's sort of something that's going on in the world now where there's a kind of when you look at like nuclear weapons, for example, it kind of gives this impression that our technology is advanced enough to create great destruction in the world, but I don't think we necessarily have a positive equivalent or like a counterbalance to a nuclear weapon, in the sense that, like, I think that the human mind applied to technology in terms of great destruction is something that's more status quo, right? Destruction of the environment, destruction of ecosystems, destruction of relationships, or so forth. Whatever I like to reduce to.
There's so many different facets of our technology that have that destructive power.
Right, and it's less so about it's not entirely about the destructive nature. It's not that that technology is neither inherently destructive nor great. It's merely augmentations of human capabilities, and it kind of does the onus kind of spiritually does sort of fall on a group to remind the world of that.
Well, right.
Because
well,
I don't think we hear about that enough. We don't hear about that angle.
That is that opposing creative force that you're saying. That, I mean, you're right. You know, we definitely don't access that like we access that destructive nature, which is, you know, really when you think, it's just splitting atoms and seeing the power that comes from dissecting the smallest particles of matter, right? Like how quantum physics and quantum theory is really saying that, you know, most of what we perceive is actually empty space. You know, we were listening to that podcast earlier that was talking about that, and you know how if you can perceive the subatomic particles on their, you know, if you could see them individually, you would see them floating in just empty space, right? And that we're creating that destructive energy from that deep knowledge of the microcosm, but without actually understanding it. But I would disagree and say we do have that opposing good creative force, and that is the spiritual practice, that falling into that destructive tendency does so much damage to our psyche and causes this wave of trauma that, like, the atomic bomb set off a wave of trauma throughout the entire world, set out just waves of negative energy. But we do have a remedy to that, and that is spiritual practice. That is meditation. That is forms of prayer. That is owning up and actually giving reparations to the things we do. You know, that is necessary as a culture. You know, we don't realize it, but we actually, as you know, America is the source of so much trauma. And so part of that is dealing with that, being honest about that. You can't actually heal something if you can't own up to it. You know, it's, you know, we see that with tendencies in our own self, right? You know, if we repress an emotion, that manifests as harm and disease in our body. If we create psychosis in our mind, that shows.
It comes out culturally. The culture reflects the moods.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about that. Go, because that is 100% true. It comes just like on an individual level, negative repressed emotion comes out as, you know, homophobia, racism.
Rage.
Talk about that how that happens on a national level. How does that happen on a national level?
Media, like that's the thing, like about the expanded resources and technologies, like beyond even what we can, you know, what we can imagine, you know, and media, because like it's so quick, you know, things are just shared so fast.
Right. It creates a picture.
and so fast that like like the Inception movie was talking about, like you implant a thought into someone's mind. Like it happened so fast that you didn't even know that you saw that.
Right.
You think that you thought that yourself. And so like
Jesus.
that's how groupthink can work through media, because it's that quick. And
Oh my God, it's horrifying.
Do you know about
I just don't even understand that that's what's happening.
Do you know about subliminal advertising? Like how, like for example, during especially they banned it, but there was a time during like our Hollywood, our cinema industry, where companies like Coke, for example, they could buy like a tile of a movie of a second, a reel, if you will, of the film, and it could say like drink Coke in it, and it would actually implant in people's minds visually to start to crave Coke.
So subliminally, they want to drink
Right.
more Coca-Cola, right?
Yeah.
So that's what is. I mean, that is it, 100%. So what is it that happens on that political scale? Where is the racist Coke advertisements that's in our culture today? Because the thing that you were talking about before is it just happens without us realizing it, and part of that is because this shit's been going on since the fucking creation of America, right? So we're born into this strong system that's continually feeding off that negativity, right?
Yeah.
And it's just part of our goal to realize that,
Right.
and break and observe it and learn how to take yourself out of that.
Yeah. Right. To take a step back, you can't see the forest for the trees.
Right.
You can't see the trees for the folk. You can't see that anything. Fucking
John Cena.
John Cena can't see me. Yeah, dog. No, it's just crazy because it's the hyperactive version of all of that. Everything, the continuation of it with these hyper expanded resources.
Right.
From not even that long ago. You know what I'm saying? It's like you know how like you've been looking at more exponential charts ever since March.
Right.
Like the level of exponential charts you've been watching looks like an exponential chart since March. It's just shot up. Though technology and all that, and just like the amount of people, all the population, all that looks like an exponential chart.
Right.
Going straight up. We're at this like we're up there in terms of both. Where it all kind of like came to a head, in a relatively short amount of time, considering how long it was sloping up. You know what I mean?
Right.
The population and everything, and how much technology we had.
Yeah.
Think about where we were like a century ago, and how this shit was happening, but the same racist shit was happening. Just like a cool, just because we didn't have so much transparency of like shit getting shared all around.
Right. I mean,
habits die hard. I mean, like these are things that if this is something that was endemic in our society for a long time, it's not just going to go away overnight, right? Like there's going to be some I think it's an interesting economic term called Tarzan economics, which is like the idea that like people inherently want to resist change. They want to hang on to the vine and not touch the jungle floor, right? But ultimately you want your reality to be on the jungle floor, right? Be in the moment and not being so concerned, so afraid of change.
Right.
Because change is going to happen.
No, yeah, no, to go back about what you were saying about things in the 1920s and how things happened on a seemingly, I mean, like it was actually way more blatant, right?
Yeah.
But our perception was that it was more covert. We're still incredibly segregated today, right? But we the one thing that's actually, since the civil rights movement, is that we are at least more actively trying to be integrated, whether or not we're doing it in the best means necessary. We're actually taking steps. We're trying to break the bubble that we had before, and we all, or not we, because we weren't alive, obviously, but what enables systemic racism so much more back then was that people were able to exist in a bubble. If they lived in an all-white community, you could easily think, oh, of course I like black people. Of course I like people who are different than me. Why wouldn't you? Because you were never confronted with people who were different from you. You were built upon these societal norms that you had to follow, and you didn't realize that part of those societal norms you're following are racial structure identities.
Yeah.
And so when we first started breaking the bubble, that's also people having to deal with their internal racism. That's I mean, it's not necessarily our fault. It's conditioned by the system, but it's still something in us that, I mean, I speak more for myself being a white person, a white man, but but you know, as stuff that I see that I clearly need to work out. This is something that was stuffed in me, and you know, stuff that I thought was okay, stuff that, you know, and it just, it's little by little it happens. You know, everyone needs to do that.
It's interesting with the bubble thing, because like it used to be way more overtly segregated, which is like literally like the white people live here, the black people live there,
Right.
and no like massive media presence overlapping anything. That's, I guess, one of the key differences too. But just the connection I'm making with like technology and racism, where it's like, because like then like virtual bubbles happen.
Right.
People had some crazy fucking thoughts, but found other people have those same crazy fucking thoughts.
Confirmation bias, right? So confirmation bias states that one of the reasons that like politics is so like personal and so divisive for people is you're gonna find your lane, you're gonna have your certain leaning, and you're gonna only look for facts that reinforce that idea, because because reality is far too complicated for any one person to sort of understand. I like this analogy I heard at work once, which is, it's like a lot of blind people touching an elephant, right? And every blind person can bring a different story. And it's all the same elephant, but it can only be from their particular perspective. But when you bring that together, right? When you can talk about it and converge the elephant, right? That's when you can get the full understanding of reality. But the average person is programmed to think that way.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting. I feel like with the whole virtual bubbles thing too, like because it's virtual, it's not like how was like my community around me. I see this.
Right.
This is just what I know. Because it's virtual, it just twists with people's minds, and that's why people like straight up pretty much questioning reality at this point, right? In multiple ways. I don't know. It's like, it's just crazy how like with those kind of tools of like virtual bubbles, it's like so able to be flipped, like kind of like so quick. Like now, because you're able to find people with the same crazy thoughts, those people who are like dead, like it's very much an opinion. Like actually, racism happens more to white people. Like people, like there's a community of people,
right?
Then you know,
and that's why
not that long ago, that wasn't real. Like, you know, I feel like the civil rights movement kind of brought it to a point of like, you know, racism is a problem, and they're starting to think about, gee, should we do something about it? That's what it kind of, you know what I mean? And then all like in not that long of a time, through the underbelly of the internet, kind of pretty much. The thought spread to like, well, actually, are white people the ones who are, you know, all in their own bubble? Because it's like the switch flipped.
Right.
White people are really the ones who are being oppressed. Because that's how it is. That's what they said with Trump getting elected. He made a majority feel like a minority.
Well, I think I think that's the difference between de facto versus de jure, and what that means is that's Latin, so just de facto being like in fact, rather than de jure being in law. So when people talk about racism doesn't exist, what they really mean is it has become illegal on paper, right? So people get hung up on that part.
Right.
They can't differentiate between de jure, the fact that something is said on paper, and in fact, which is what is actually happening.
Things are changing, and it's affecting everyday life, and people want to hold on to whatever they had. Either people want to hold on to power, or people want to, I don't know, they just want to. Everyone resists change, and if things are going all right for you, and we're just going to expand the way that we include everybody, then people just get, unnecessarily selfish. And I think they, the deepest part of them just gets scared. It's just like, part of having a practice like this is so great, because you just get to breathe through all those changes, right? That's the thing that keeps you anchored. Just knowing that the only constant that there is change. Right. There is no other thing that we can rely on. We can always rely on things not being like this present moment. That is it. And culturally, that's just something that America is not good with, right? We want to be like the nation of preservation, upholding the American way and making sure everyone does this, right? There really is true greatness that comes from our systems, but it's founded on hypocrisy, right? It's absurd. That the people who we revere for upholding freedom were the greatest monsters that ever lived. George Washington is a deviant.
Right. And they say his teeth are actually for slaves.
Dude. I just heard that. Yeah. It's absurd. It's the thing that held the teeth in place were wooden, but the teeth were actually teeth of slaves, and that they were either killed for their teeth alone or just ripped out of a live head.
That makes me think of that's the Get Out shit.
Yeah.
Want we this is a thing, like the whole the imitation of the flattery of imitation, whatever it is. How racism works in a twisted way.
Imitation
at its core,
flattery,
right? Yeah. Because and how Get Out was talking about, and how it sounds like George Washington using a black person's body parts they're saying we want to use your bodies. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And Get Out, he wanted his eyes because he's blind, but I want your photography skills. Let me use your body and make something.
You're right. It is that, but it's also treating another human being as a commodity, something to be farmed for your own use, for your own preservation. Yeah.
Like farming, that's the concept, and that whole it just kind of reminds you of that. Cause, it puts George Washington in a whole new light. It's horrible shit.
Right.
It's way different.
All those guys were like that.
Yeah,
every single one of them.
Yeah, of course.
History is written from the perspective of the victor, right? Everything about every single statue that's of somebody of the founding fathers or people, even Teddy Roosevelt, like Mount Rushmore.
Yeah,
that's not an accident too. That's on purpose. That is to send a message to the native people. We're watching you. That's 8 eyes.
That's what that. Yeah.
Theodore Roosevelt. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he killed most of the Native Americans. He wiped out most of them. I think it was, or just someone of a close preceding generation. Right.
Trail of Tears.
I know, but there were still a decent amount of Native Americans. The end of the 1800s, which is
right. One of my favorite bands of all time, Protest the Hero, just released this awesome album that really is very critical of America, and they talk about this. It's a song called Little Snakes, and one of the eyes is it's 8 eyes to watch little snakes. And they quote Theodore Roosevelt by saying, he says, I don't think only the good Indians are dead, right? That's their justification. Where a lot of bad people were wiped out in this, but for every one supposedly bad Native American that was wiped out, 9 good ones were wiped out too, right?
Right.
This is a complete unacknowledgement of. Oh, I mean, it's not even an acknowledgement, right? It's a way. It's a way. It's a way of the truth is too sinister. It's a way of sidestepping genocide, and
Because it makes people sad to learn about that, right?
well, I mean, but it's necessary too, because
course
we go along with these systems thinking we're this, symbol of justice, right? That was probably the perception I had up until like 3rd, 4th grade.
Oh yeah, the world's police.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we're spreading good stuff in the world, right? And then pretty quickly, I feel like every generation comes to that realization quicker and quicker.
Yeah.
But pretty quickly you realize, oh wait, no, this is, we're finally able to hear the opinion of the rest of the world, So it's like, oh shit, you guys are saying this, I think the initial reaction for most Americans is to say, fuck you, that's not true. But I think a good chunk of us sort of hear that and start to really change our perspective quickly.
Yeah.
Fuck, dude.
Damn.
But yeah, no, I mean, if we can redirect the conversation a little bit, we don't gotta just focus on the government. It's not what this podcast is really about. But
It's not the hate comes out.
yeah, I mean, shit. I mean, when you start observing through meditation practice, you start observing, right?
Yes.
This is part of what we were talking about earlier, which is dragging the practice into everyday life. You shouldn't just do it on a base level of your senses of just being quote unquote present in the moment, right? You need to observe and dismantle.
Yeah, I mean, it all connects. Like, when you think about the slaves, couldn't meditate. So and like in terms of like the ancient practice, like being connected
Wait,
to that,
say that again.
the slaves couldn't meditate.
You said couldn't?
Yeah, right.
What do you mean?
I'm saying like that's in terms of like the connection between the two topics is kind of.
Well, I think anyone can meditate, and I think that the slaves did meditate and have strong spiritual practices. I mean, I can't speak a lot about the specifics of early African American spirituality, but it's certainly in Brazil and Angola, where the slave trade was very strong under the Portuguese Empire, capoeira, which is a martial art that was developed by slaves, is deeply, deeply spiritual. It has connections to certain deities, either that come from the Yoruba or I'm blanking on certain African religious practices, but they 100% blended them, and these capoeiristas were thought of as being like mythical, mystic beings. Some of them. There's a great movie called Besoro, which is a capoeira martial arts movie where the master reincarnates himself and it appears as a vision to his student after he passes on to keep training him in capoeira and give him spiritual knowledge. So it's definitely certainly the aim of the colonists to dismantle and destroy that spiritual pride too. But the thing is, it always exists. One of my favorite quotes from.
I meant they weren't allowed.
Of course. Yeah, yes. Then absolutely. But to say they couldn't is.
So that's what I mean. Like now you are fully allowed to.
Of course, yeah.
So like practice that. And I was just saying, like, because George Washington was like just connected to the inner chakra. You know what I'm saying? Anyone with that much power throughout history is connected to the inner.
I disagree. I think the monsters of early time are the people most disconnected. I mean, they definitely have a certain sense, a certain intelligence. But I think when you're truly
conspiracy theory movie, everyone's connected back to the same like the cranium skulls.
That's different, right? And that's also some crazy shit. We don't need to go there yet. That's a whole other podcast. That's
next show.
That's no. That's episode 50. We're not ready to get to conspiracy theories yet. But
in time,
there's just one thing I wanted to go back to, and it's because it's a concept that I truly, one of my favorite concepts of spirituality, which is, or just and stuff that gives me hope for the human race, which is that we're born, no matter what circumstance we're in. Of course, it's harder to access this in certain phases of life than others, but no matter where we are, we have a brain, we have a mind, we have consciousness. That is the key to the practice.
Right.
All you need is consciousness. There was a very famous, the founder of Stoicism, Epictetus, a famous Greek philosopher, said he was. I mean, and I don't mean to sound insensitive when he says this, but that he was the most free and unbound when he was chained, because that's when he was forced to do spiritual practice. And although that takes an immense amount of discipline and power to be able to access that when you're bound, right? That when you're at your most vulnerable and literally captured, that takes someone like a prophet to do, right? That is beyond human to do. But we all really do have that capability, and that's the point of sayings like that, to help those who are in that situation to try to break free, to try to find that.
Yeah. And you see that a lot in types of Christianity too around the world, but the U.S. being no exception, where when there was proselytizing and when there were attempts to get African slaves and enslaved Africans to assimilate into American life and the plantation system that they were trapped in via Christianity as sort of bridging a gap. However, certain practices from a lot of these African cultures, particularly mentioned Yoruba, right? And it comes in the case of Santeria,
right.
You've seen it in Voodoo, where that gets absorbed into Christianity, and it becomes a sort of hybrid in a lot of ways.
It gets absorbed into both systems.
Correct.
It gets absorbed. Christianity gets absorbed into Santeria as well.
Right. Because a conversation happened with these religions,
right,
very early on, and we still see the legacy of that.
Well, that's the power of tantra, true tantra, right? Not neo tantra, which we equate to sexual acts. Real tantra has nothing to do with sexual acts, but taking pain and transmuting it into the spiritual path, right? That's the essence of taking. I mean, because the essence of Christianity is, although was used by the colonists and the oppressors, the essence of Christianity is not to oppress. The essence of Christianity is love and connectedness through God. So that is powerful enough to be adopted into any other system and to make something new. Spiritual innovation exists just as much as scientific innovation. People continue to create new systems of spirituality that are rooted in ancient practice, but are something new in their own, and that's what causes transformation. It takes something negative and transmutes it to something positive, and that speaks enough for itself.
I bet a lot of people overlook how young of a religion Scientology is, for example, right? Because of how, like even people don't think of it as religion. Like it is a card carrying religion, right? Like
right.
It is like it has a devout set of believers that legitimately believe, rightly or wrongly, or we can question the sincerity of it at times. This religious system that came from a science fiction writer in the 1950s, who interestingly dabbled a lot in meta awareness, right, and mindfulness in a way. Like he was tapping into it in a way that maybe was a little misplaced at times, or there was a little bit of maybe bullshit involved. But one of the reasons that Scientology has endured as a religion is because there's a lot of value in what they call auditing, right? Which is being able to be honest with yourself. That comes in the form of what auditing really is it's just meta awareness with a lie detector test. So you're given a lie detector test and you're asked very spiritual questions about yourself, right? And sometimes forcing you to answer the question kind of gauges your opinion, right, on some of these things, which I find interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a pretty great conversation. I mean, the conversation's not going to end. I'm really excited just to do this podcast with you guys.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Amazing.
This is the first of many, topics, and yeah, it's just really good to just, fuck, dude, I don't even know. Just something we've always talked about, and now we're just fucking doing it. So
yeah,
it's great.
It's in.
Yeah.
All about that.
That's the name.
No, I don't like that.
It's not the name.
I don't like it.
You gotta have a board meeting.
Zen isn't something we need to get or obtain, right? It's something that's always present. So,
in the immortal words of Marshawn Lynch, I'm all about the action. I never heard any talk that was worth anything.
Hey, man, I like that. Yeah.
Because it's true, right?
Absolutely.
Talk's not really worth anything, right? It's just action.
Yeah, knowing and doing are two different things, right? But yeah, so
Yeah, it's better to know than to learn.
If you
can I hit the button?
Cut it.
Cut.
Cutty.